And one more thing, I'm going to turn this over to Reverend Robert Ives, otherwise known to all of us as Bobbie. And he's going to be the host of the evening. And I would read all of the wonderful things about him, but I just suggest you all go online and read all those great entries about his life, and you all know him very well. So once again, welcome and have a good time.
Well, thank you so much. If you go online, just go into the police blotter. That's where I'm So I too would, can you hear me okay? Is this too loud? Okay. So I too would like to welcome you all. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Certainly on behalf of the New Harbor United Methodist Church, I'd again not only like to welcome you, but thank you for coming to this very special event. This is just a great time to hear this remarkable and distinguished panel talking to us about growing up in New Harbor, Maine. Now, it's a very appropriate thing to do that because I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago that a magazine called Reader's Digest declared Bristol, Maine as the best place to grow up in all of Maine. And the reason it's such a wonderful place is because of people like these right here and all of you as well. So it's a remarkable place to truly grow up. So we're here to hear these wonderful stories about growing up in New Harbor, Maine. But we're also here for another reason, and that is to have a little fundraiser, because as you walked in, you saw that very sad sight of a steeple lying solitary right there on the lawn. It's not horizontal, but we would like to make it vertical on top of this church. So we're hoping that we're able to repair it and restore it and to renovate it and put it back up where it belongs. So this is a fundraiser. Actually, how are we going to get funds? How do we do this?
It's back there.
Oh, okay. So indeed, it's a free will offering. Please, if you contribute, we would be very, very grateful for that. My name is Bobbie Ives, and indeed, I feel very fortunate to be here because I actually was a minister of this church. It seems like a long time ago, but it was not. It was actually in the 1970s. And indeed, we came to this church as the ministers because sadly, the minister of this church, Dr. John Wesley McKelvey, a good Methodist, of course, Dr. John Wesley McKelvey. How many of you remember John Wesley McKelvey? Oh, good. Oh, good. So indeed, John Wesley McKelvey sadly died of cancer here. And when he died, the Bishop Ed Carroll, actually gave us a call. He didn't call us on Lowndes Island. We don't have any telephones on Lowndes Island. We do on the island, but not to the mainland. But he got in touch with us, and he asked us if we would be the interim minister here in New Harbor and Round Pond. Well, we were thrilled and very honored to do that, and indeed we came in 1977 and served here for 2.5 years. It was just the best time. So good was it that we thought, when the new minister came, this is the place to live. There's nothing like New Harbor and this whole area, and that's where we've been right here ever since we left there in 1979. So it's just a great place. I might also mention that my dear wife sitting right here, her great-grandfather was the minister of this very church from 1898 to 1902. Anyway, we're here to hear these wonderful stories from this distinguished panel. They need no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we're going to start with this man right here, Jack Brackett. Everyone knows Jack. He's been here his whole life. Jack started fishing with his dad, Buff Brackett, when he was a teenager. He was a lobster fisherman, a singer, a dragger, a well driller, and a wonderful fireman. Kay Hanna, again, Kay Sawyer Hanna, indeed, is a daughter of New Harbor, raised here. She took a little sabbatical for about 40 years and went over to some state called Vermont. where her husband Pete was a professor at UVM over there. But we're so grateful that they decided to retire and come back home to New Harbor, Maine. Brian Sawyer here, of course, has been a native son all his life. He started fishing when he was a teenager. He started fishing out of a Rupert Riley skiff. Rupert Riley being a great boat builder over here. Brian has been a lobster fisherman for over 60 years. And Steve Hope over here, another native son right here. Steve has been fishing pretty much his whole for over 50 years. And of course, Steve also is the harbor master of New Harbor and Back Cove and Chamberlain Long Cove and Browns Cove. So here is this wonderful gathering of individuals. So the way we're going to do it tonight is I'm going to ask them questions. They then will respond to the questions. Then you will have a crack at them, and you can ask a question. This isn't like the presidential debates, but nevertheless, you can have a crack at them by asking a question also, and we're even going to invite you, if you would like, to perhaps share a story as well. Now, I would underscore this, and that is, if you share a story, let's have a short story. I've heard these stories around, and indeed, I know how people go on. Indeed, we're going to only be here until 8:30 at the longest, okay? So, in any event, you're welcome to do that as well. So that's our format for this evening, and we will begin our lovely journey down memory lane with this lovely group of people. So the first question that I would like to ask them is quite simply, who was your favorite or most memorable person growing up in New Harbor? Jack Brackett.
Well, I would think it might be my mother, probably. And of course, all these houses around here, Rowley's and Penman's around here when I was younger. The surf casino, which probably some people would know, was down behind where the bank is now. And Penman's was so you could store at the time, so you could go in one side of it and come out the other, and we lived right over. When my wife and I lived right over here, it was quite handy.
Right. Thank you. Yep, no. Probably the best is don't turn it off. Just pass it from one person to the next. Yeah, that's great.
And just a note, it helps if you hold it towards your mouth instead of away from you.
Like this?
Yes.
Oh, I just want to say it's so nice to see all of you here. Relatives and friends and relatives of friends. It's some people I've never even met that who have a feeling for here. Of course I'd have to say Dad was my favorite person, but as far as an interesting character, I would go to my grandfather, who we called Gump. I guess he got that from Gramp somehow down to Gump. But he was Frank Ocean. He lived on the north side of New Harbor, and I had moved here with my family when I was 4 years old. This was my mother's hometown, so she was delighted to be here. And I lived about 5 houses down from Riley's store. And I could just, it took me a while to get acquainted around here, to feel at home. I missed the farm we lived on in Round Pond, but I got used to it, and it was awful nice to walk down the wooden sidewalk that went down the lane from our house, I guess, about down to where the boatyard is at least. And then cut across the field, Brackett's field, to the fish house that is now standing but renovated, and up across another field to where my grandparents lived. My grandmother was always busy, it seemed. They had raised 8 children. She not only washed for all of them, but took in washing, was braiding rugs and tending the garden, garden and canning, and had the molasses, always some molasses cookies and sugar cookies in the jar in the kitchen, or so it seemed. They were always there. And we'd look around for Gump. If he wasn't out in his boat, we could quite often find him out in the woodshed. He had a room up overhead that you reached by climbing up wooden rungs attached to the wall. And up there was his little den, sort of. It was a way to get away. There were 15 grandchildren coming and going too, and so it was a way to get away, but we found them, and there was salt. The aroma was something you'd never forget. Salt cod, tobacco, I suppose paint. He made his trap heads, is that what you call them, for his traps there. He usually had some mint candy for us. He didn't tell us stories at that time, but he was quite a storyteller, and his recordings are at the Bristol Library, some of his fish tales. He was also a singer. He played a harmonica and sang songs like The Yellow Rose of Texas. We couldn't get him to sing in his later years, but he was quite a character. Maybe my brother Brian would like to add a little bit to that. I don't know. Or you have somebody else? Or did I take your story away?
We haven't compared notes, and yes, you did steal my story. I'm going to add to it just a little bit. Frank, my grandfather, our grandfather, raised 7 children. A number of them went to college. They were all great people. A few of them were fishermen. Frank's relatives came over. One of them, Joseph Bozier, was a lieutenant in the Revolutionary War. He came from France, and he fought with the Americans. And I've always been proud of that. And I remember Frank very well sitting in his chair. He was in holding court with people that would come and listen to his stories, and he was a very good storyteller. One of the things I remember very well about him, I was quite young, but he remembered how he and his compatriots fished over the years, and he told me when I was quite young, he said, this business with these big trawlers and the bigger motors and working on fish day and night, dragging them, is going to come to a bad end at some point. This would have been back in the 60s. And by the late 80s, the New England ground fishery had declined enormously. So when I think back on that, I think how right he was, that he saw that coming. And I remember, I think in his day, fishermen would fish on a species of fish until they got what they wanted out of it. They didn't carry it over. There was a season for everything. They might stop fishing when they had enough to fill their markets, and they'd leave it alone. So I have fond memories of him and how prophetic he was off in the future.
I was lucky enough to grow up just down the road here on Rogers Road, and Rogers Road was full of characters. But to pick one would be very hard to do. Albert Curtis, he would give you hell, but you'd always come away with a lesson. He looked out for people. If he liked you, you were all right. And Bill Chase, next door to where I grew up, taught me basic woodworking and a lot of life lessons. And we also had Dan Thompson, who was a very wise man. And we were just lucky to have all these guys. And I miss them all.
Great, so our next question, our next question is from you. Is there any question you would like to ask of them related to the favorite person or the earliest memory of an individual? anyone like to ask a question? Anyone want to add a story? We'll move on to the next question. So what was your earliest memory growing up here in New Harbor? Your earliest memory? Jack, we'll start with you.
Oh, I don't really know, but I went to school right across the road where the firehouse is now. It was called Mavushin School. And my grandmother lived right here alongside the church, so it was a good way to grow up, because she'd have my dinner ready and I could go to school. And yeah, it just seemed like the people in town, no matter who you run into, I mean, as children, we knew about everybody that was in town, and it was like more of a family than today. People today go on.
Perfect.
It's hard to say my earliest memory, but it was awful nice to be able to walk around the neighborhood and meet the people. And I was in their home, like Charlena and Bertha and Carol lived just in the first house here down the lane on the left. And she had polio, but and was in a wheelchair. She always welcomed us in. And she allowed me to bang on her piano because I didn't know how to play it. She was very tolerant of that. Another thing that stood out in my mind was when I could run up to the store for my mother and get groceries or something. The post office was just here, just south of Riley's store, and then Riley's store, you'd go in the door and the counter was on the right, and the floors were the same as they are now, I believe. And there was a big pot-bellied stove in the middle of it, and there'd always be a bunch of men standing around there talking. And I would cringe because they teased me. So I'd always go in there and grab her beer something.
To be perfectly honest, the first memory I have, I think, was when somebody told me I was going to go to school, and I was about 4 and a half, and I could see that the endless summer was going to come. But I do remember having my mother walk us clear through the back way along the shore down to Pumpkin Cove, and where we ate our tuna fish and egg salad sandwiches, and what a long treat that was to go down there and back with my two sisters. And I remember also going up to the barber shop here, which is where the carpenter has this little place right across from Riley's store. There was a barber shop there, and going in there with my father and seeing all the local men, and just enjoying listening to them talk and getting acquainted with the village. Some of my earliest thoughts, memories.
And going in the barber shop, I was always impressed with them playing checkers. There was some serious games took place in there. And because living right on the south side, we could walk to Back Cove and New Harbor. And my mother would always take us to Pembroke Beach. And just having this stuff at our disposal, it's just like heaven. Simplicity of it all was great. And you felt completely safe. And all the parents looked out for all the kids. And they could get after you. Didn't matter whose kid it was. They could get after you. And they may have done that once or twice with me.
Steve, I'd like to mention that I remember probably about 30 years ago, if not long, well, it must have been longer, 40 years ago, there was an article in National Geographic about Mid-Coast Maine, and there was Lester Russell right there cutting hair, other people playing checkers, right in National Geographic magazine.
Paul Hammond.
Paul Hammond, exactly. Any other questions for these gentlemen and ladies?
When you got a hack at Lester's, it wouldn't be uncommon to wait quite a while because he always rolled his cigarettes. It took quite a while with the tobacco and everything. And you could leave, and if you wanted a haircut at midnight, he'd be still open. And they said he had the only cow in town that was milked at 12 o'clock at night. I just want to mention another thing. When I was 6 years old, I had my mother came from Portland. I happened to be down there. And I don't know if you people ever read about it or not, but there was a boat called the Oakley Alexander. And it was a coal boat, and they took a lot of coal in Portland to distribute through the area. And we knew from the radio that the boat was in trouble, and we knew where it was coming in, and it come in right near the lighthouse, but in Portland. My father happened to be there, and we knew he knew I was interested, so he took me over. I was 6 years old, and I can remember it just as plain as day, and there was one tree in a place about as long as, maybe a football field. And the bow of that coal, it was very rough seas, broke off due to the heavy load of coal that happened to break just in front of the bulkhead in the vessel, and he happened to have every man on the back of the boat in the powerhouse area. And the captain was shrewd enough to put that boat in there with those big seas rolling in front of that one tree, and they used a breech buoy to get every man off of it, and they never lost a man. And if you want to read that, it would be in books you could pick up tonight.
Jack, how many men were on that column?
I can't honestly tell you, but I know that we stayed there quite a while, and they brought quite a few ashore.
Yeah.
Using that one tree.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing.
Can I?
Sure.
I just wanted to add one of my first sad memories. It was when it was in 1944, and it was when word came back that my Uncle Louis was missing. He'd been on a mailboat, right? Mailboat, yeah. And was lost at sea. And we waited and waited, hoping for better news. As I think back, I'm thinking these were war years, and yet we didn't feel that too much. I had 3 or 4 uncles that went in the service. But the parents, I must have kept it from us pretty well. We had a nice growing up in spite of that, but it was a big factor during our growing up years.
Speaking of sad memories, the first funeral I did when I was the minister here was the funeral for Lester Russell. So 1977. So our next question is, what was the saddest time you experienced as a child growing up? What was the saddest time as a child growing up? So thank you, Kate, for that answer.
I can't really tell you, but my mother and father were married for 36 years, and I was 28 years old, and I think that was probably the saddest time in my lifetime.
I was awful sad when we moved to New Harbor. and we had a cat named Tar Baby, and he disappeared. And it was 2 months later that we found him back at the farm.
Tar Baby was with us when I was around. That was quite a trip. 6 miles over a couple of waterways, and I think he did it twice, went back to Round Pond. I was also there when Car Baby didn't go across the driveway fast enough. So I saw Car Baby's final demise, and I remember that quite well.
My saddest time would have to be my father died when I was 3. It was cancer. And the second worst was probably when the McLean boys got in that accident. They were all killed. I was about 10. I knew most of them, and that was a pretty sad moment.
Any other questions?
Over here. Anybody ever have an ice box and had ice from the ice house across the peninsula?
Did any of you have an ice box and get ice for the ice box across the peninsula?
That ice house over there.
At the Thompson Ice House.
Oh, I thought you meant the one in New House.
Well, we had, and the ice house here as well.
That was gone quite a while ago.
Yeah.
I don't know who would remember, but Cliff cut ice down there. And my father at that time had a truck with a plow on it, and Veg used to plow it down there, and I used to ride with him some, and they'd plow it off and let it freeze to whatever it would, a foot, maybe a foot and a half, and then they cut it, and there was 2 ice houses down where before you get to Mr. Rowlett's house now. And they, of course, at that time, they bury it in sawdust, and then they'd bring a certain amount each day up to Hannah's Drive, and then he had a man that called Verge Little that would deliver it around. And Verge was he liked this liquor pretty good. He went in this place, and there was some in the ice box while he was delivering the ice, and he says, took a little, left a little, he little.
So the next, go ahead, Ken.
We kids like the ice a lot. It's not so much the ice that was brought to the homes, but it was great fun going down to the ice pond and skating across it, way up around the corner, and having a big bonfire. Oh boy, and then oftentimes we'd go back to Lester Russell's house and Winty's house and have hot chocolate, and they'd put some of their homegrown cream in it. Oh, that's my memory of ice.
I remember the ice house. We did have an ice house similar to the one that they restored over in South Bristol in the little pond headed down to Shaw's on the north side. And I remember them going by on the school bus and seeing the men out there cutting the ice, and they'd take it in blocks and bring it in just a slab building there and pack it with sawdust. And that was where ice was saved basically for the fish business, the fishing business, so that in the spring of the year, when that was traditional ground fishing season, they would bring that ice down to the harbor, and they had these little machines with knobs and rollers on them. They'd dump that block of ice in there, and that little, seemed to me it was a 1-1 or it was loud. And that would churn the ice, and the guys would shovel it into the boxes, wooden boxes, the fish were packed in, and that was the way it was. That stood there, I think, probably until almost 1960 or so.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I'm going to 57.
So the next question is for the fishermen here. When, how, and why did you start fishing?
Well, to give you a truthful answer why I started, I was married, and my father was a fisherman, and he needed a man. I guess I was it. And he'd fish days that today they would stay in, come to We fished it most days. If it didn't blow over 35 miles an hour, we fished, and that was when we was dragging. And we dragged mostly 2 hours to the east of the Montego. So actually, that was a 3-hour run to get where we fished. And then, just as they was talking about ice, like they'd grind it on the wharf and we'd put it in the boat, and when the fish come in, we'd ice them in the hole. We'd get in, or they'd ice them out in the basket and do just what they said and ship them.
What kind of fish?
We'd catch flounders and haddock and codfish, and once in a while you'd get what they call a catfish. And when my wife and I lived home there, when I was fishing, we had I didn't bring redfish home. Most people use redfish for bait, but when they're first caught, they're fine if you fillet them out.
They sell them now for people to eat.
Yeah, well, things have changed. They eat steak wings now that we used to throw overboard, and mocktails, which they sell, which we used to throw overboard, and things of that. Things change.
First time I saw redfish at Denver, I was thinking back to my bait days.
Right. You can pass it down.
I started fishing when when I went down to the wharf and went down on the float and had the jigs. I went jigging for mackerel. I wanted to go lobstering so bad, but Dad just wouldn't go for it. I was a girl.
First of all, I want to admit that my sister is much brighter than I and chose another career. But I heard the siren of the sea when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and I followed it to the harbor, and there was an awful lot of, it was just like a magnet. There was a lot of things going on there. But Jack's family, I was a good friend of Jack's brother, and I got to see how they made a living, and all the other fishermen, and the fish, and the gulls, and the boats. It was a very strong magnet, and I don't regret going at all. I was a lot of hard work at times, but one of the best feelings you could have was when you put a long day in at sea. You came in with whatever you had, lobster, shrimp, or whatever. You done the best you could. Maybe the weather's shutting down, and you come home to a home-cooked meal. And it was a great feeling.
It was, well, there was not that many jobs really on land, and you just start going to the harbor and hanging out. I had friends a little bit older that had started fishing, and they thought it looked pretty interesting. So I went around, I bumped a few traps from the old traps from the fishermen, come up with an old boat, and had an outboard, but I did a lot of rowing that first year. But you get in and they give you a slip at the end of the day, you go home and add it up, said, well, this looks pretty good. It's pretty good money. So it gets in your blood. There's no question about it. It gets in your blood. If you don't like it, you're not going to want to do it. So, but I have no regrets.
So the next question is, what is the oldest story about New Harbor that a grandparent or even a great-grandparent might have actually told you? Now the reason I ask that is because I used to have a friend who was a minister in Friendship. And he was a minister in Friendship in the late 60s and early 70s. And when he was the Methodist minister in Friendship, he went to a home and there was a 95-year-old lady there. And she started telling him some stories. And she said, you know, when my grandmother was a little girl, she remembered a battle that took place right out here in Muscongas Bay. And there were cannons and all kinds of activity. And we could see those two ships coming together. That was, of course, the Boxer and the Enterprise, 1813, that she was talking about, that my friend was hearing that story almost firsthand. I mean, it's through second generations. But it came right home at that point. So I'm wondering if you might have stories like that, that grandparents might have told you that they actually participated in, maybe 3 generations.
I had a great-grandfather who would be 105. His name was called Alexander Churchill McLean. And he was one of the ones that went out on the H.H. Chamberlain that was, she was moored over the Pemmican Beach right off the Noah's Ark there, and they were loading machinery on her at the time, and I think it was a gale of 1898, and they slipped the anchor hoping to get into Booth Bay, but it didn't happen. And he has set us children. Paul Chase was a cousin of mine. How Paul was a cousin of my father. Maybe some of you know Paul's mother and my father were brother and sister. So he would sit us children around, my grandfather would, and tell us a story about tying men to the wheel of the H.H. Chamberlain. One guy tried that, and they tied him up and put him down in the hole. And he saw the steamer Portland lights before the Portland was lost. And you can read in history books, and this will come out true, you know. And I've heard my father say that, I can't remember this, but I heard my father say the guy was the captain of the steamer coming this way to Portland. He knew the weather was so bad that he really didn't want to come, and the guy or the company that owned the steamship that was bringing the passengers this way, he said, if you don't go, we'll get somebody that will go. And none of the passengers survived. The steamer went down. And my grandfather saw the lights of that steamer, he said, at night, and he was gone for three weeks, and of course there was no communication like today, and of course my grandmother and his wife and everything, his wife's name was Lou. He called her Lois, and that's how Lois Chase is named after her. And they thought he was gone for it, you know, and they finally got into Tifton, Rhode Island, to come back by train, and people were quite happy to see him coming back.
I'd like to pause now for a little advertisement. And that is that the logo of the Old Bristol Historical Society is that lovely schooner there. That schooner is the H.H. Chamberlain. Thank you, Kevin.
God used to talk about going to Boston, but I'm sort of hazy on it. I know he was sailing on ships down there and was in Boston when there was a smallpox epidemic. I believe he got smallpox, but survived it and came home. Sorry, I don't have very good memory for more details on that.
You keep stealing my storyline. Well, I do remember hearing, I didn't hear it from Frank Gump, as he was called, but I believe he went under the Brooklyn Bridge when it was fairly new as a cabin boy. And that always stuck in my mind. I thought, wow, he's a famous man here. Famous to me anyway.
Well, my grandparents weren't around here, but the older fishermen in Back Cove always had stories. And one of them told me that Back Cove was referred to as Smuggler's Cove back during the Civil War. Some of the well-to-do men in this town, if they could afford it, would buy slaves down south, and they get them on sailing ships, and they bring them in Back Cove, and then they would send the slaves to the war farm, so they didn't have to go. And I'll give you one more story back Cove. I cannot find a picture of it because I guess it's back too far. Where that footbridge is nowadays, above that is called a lobster pound, and it actually was used for a lobster pound in the 30s and 40s. But before that, where that bridge is, there was a sawmill that ran off that tidal. The paddle wheel would go both directions when the tide came in or the tide came out. but I cannot find a picture of it. I'm assuming it must have been before pictures, I don't know. And I couldn't verify the story, but when I was digging a hole or a pylon under my dock, about 2 feet down, there was an inch-thick layer of sawdust. And one of the old fishermen says, that's from that sawmill. He said, that sawdust would cover the stove, they said. And it settled there, and the mud went over it, preserved it. So that was at least 100 years old, that sawdust. Not a lot of people know that story, I don't think.
Tell them about the timbers in your fish house, how it made the...
Oh, my fish house, which I was lucky to even buy, I bought from Carol Rosen. He wanted a fisherman head. I bought it in '77. It was a frame, all 2x6 framing. And he told me, he said, look at those 2x6, what do you see different about them? They all had one edge that was cut on an angle. And he said those 2x6 made this pipe that went the whole length of that pound because there was so much fresh water coming in up at the other end. They made that pipe to run the fresh water off. So he said, finally that pipe broke and it killed the lobsters. So whoever built my fish house, I'm not sure, salvaged all that lumber and put that fish house together with that lumber.
Any more questions on the, yes?
I have a question. I'm curious to know, how was it like, or what was it like dating in Round Pond when you were like a teenager? If that's not going to get anybody in trouble.
Okay, so the question for you all is what was it like dating back when you were growing up? Did you go out on dates? What was dating like? Brian, we don't want you to get too personal.
He went to Round Pond today.
Where did you go? Like, where did you go on
My
dates?
dating information is that my father went to Round Pond to find his bride, and actually he came to New Haven to find his bride, and I went the other way. I got my wife in Round Pond.
I ended up in South Bristol looking for one. As was mentioned earlier, the ice pond, we would go there to skate, and that was quite a big hangout for the local kids. When you have that bonfire, it was always, but you knew every kid in town anyway. That was a pretty good gathering spot.
Well, we didn't date when we went to the roller skating rink, but we sure had a lot of fun. That was at Pembroke Beach, and let's see, the Lewis Pavilion. It was yes. We were so lucky to have that. That was also used occasionally as a dance hall as well. It was a great social place. Our parents, when we were younger, took us there. The parents socialized and watched us skate, and that was 2 or 3 times a week we would go there. My first date wasn't until I was at the end of my freshman year in high school, and it was a prom or something. But we mainly didn't have dates that young.
Well, I'll have to agree with everybody else. I went to Round Pond. I just wanted to mention, there isn't many here that can remember it, but there was a building called the Surf Casino that was down in behind where the DB&T is right now. It was a big building, and I don't know if it's in, but probably Reggie can remember it fairly well. But I can remember it as a child. I think Russ Brackett had it made, and on one side of it was a bowling alley on the left-hand side, and they had pool tables in it, and they served, because they had an ice cream bar for it, and upstairs they had movies. And I heard my father say the movies they had was, of course, silent then, and Sadie Gilbert would play the piano and somebody would fill in what the talking should be. But I mean, it's, most people don't realize what went on years ago. They was, my mother said any night of the week, if they wanted to go to a dance, it would be possible to go somewhere, not going out of town, but just around town. And I don't know as many people would realize, but as I told you, the schoolhouse was over here right across, right where the firehouse is now, but there was also a schoolhouse down on Pamquid Point Road. There was another schoolhouse over Pamquid Beach. There was a schoolhouse in Bristol Mills. And so there was many schoolhouses around that, so children didn't, if they was walking, which they had to, then didn't have to go that far.
Next question is, did you ever get into trouble?
Did you lay awake? Well, to go back on the story about plowing the ice pond down there, I was a child and I told you that birds plowed. It was my father's truck, and I one day kept running back and forth because I wanted to get in the truck. And I slipped, and the truck had chains on it, believe it or not. My leg went under the wheel of the truck with the chains on it. And I got up and walked away, and Cliff Hanna put his boot right in my butt, and he says, "You go for home." That was one of the, he had scared into that, and I was very lucky that the chain didn't strike my leg.
You were.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about that.
I'll fill in for my sister. I know for a fact that she was missing when they lived in a farm up in Round Pond, and when she was quite small, and they found her in a nice new suit in a manure pile. Yeah, she was just little. But I got one little story I'll tell you. I get into troubles all the time, but I mowed lawns in the summer along with lobstering, and one particular day I had procrastinated, as I was meant to do when it came to anything on shore. I was always at the harbor, and a friend, Jack's brother, and I were out cruising around catching mackerel in a skiff, and we were up off of Brown's Cove, about halfway up to Round Pond, and we noticed a big shark fin come up by. And we went over and took a look. Make a long story short, it was a great white. And one of Doug Brackett, one of Jack's relatives, was nearby hauling, and I knew he was a harpooner, and we weren't sure just what it was then, but it was bigger than the boat we were in. The boat was 14 feet long, the shark was 17 feet long. We were feeding him mackerel, and it soon dawned on us that maybe that wasn't a good idea. He harpooned he went to New Harbor and harpooned that fish, and he did land it. And it took several hours. He brought it in to show us out down there. I remember the liver was one of the products they wanted out of it, and it filled a 100-pound lobster crate. It was a large shark. And unusual in the fact that a great white was here, but this was back in the mid-60s, I'd say 63 or 64. Well, everybody wanted a tooth out of the shark. They had these razor-edged teeth, and so they were prying away on them. That's when my father came down and he said, "You've got to go mow the lawn." And I did go mow my lawn, and I didn't get a tooth until a few years ago when the gentleman that harpooned it passed away. I got the tooth.
Probably the worst trouble I remember getting in, and I was no kid, I was 13 or 14. A very good friend of mine and I used to go walk around the rocks to pick up pop-buoys to use. And I had took my good friend out on a little island and dropped him off. and I was riding around the island just waiting for him, and being a dumb kid, I was standing up right in the back of that boat, and a wave come up and hit me and threw me over. And that boat kept circling, working its way down to the harbor, which is actually good because the fishermen on the dock saw it and knew something was wrong. I was treading water trying to swim to the line. I did eventually make it. But luckily Bucky Cox saw that boat and he come out and was able to get his boat in on the shore so Mike Riley and I could get back aboard him, and he saved my skip in the process. So I definitely owe that man my life.
So the next question is, what were the biggest storms you remember? Snowstorms or windstorms?
I can remember one southeast storm, and I wish I could remember the date, but I can't. But I watched green. It would be impossible to drive a car around the loop down to Pimlico Point, and there was green water coming over the lighthouse. And I wish I could remember the date to tell you about this, but I can't. But those three houses that were built on the end of Pimlico Point right now would have been in South Bristol. It was bad. It was one of the worst storms, and it was so bad that, like we talked, I don't know if you realize, but when all the fishing boats was in New Haven, it was Cordy's boat, my father's boat, Eddie's boat, Raymond Cheddar's boat, and some of them went over to South Bristol in what we call the gut over there too, where it was much, I mean, it's pretty well landlocked compared to New Haven. On the southeast, there's quite a surge coming in New Haven, and they took the boats over. And that was when I was fairly young on my trip with my father over. And I can remember the Point Ledge, Pumpkin Cove, any place that would show water all the way over was breaking.
Wow.
It was bad.
Okay.
Well, it was a pretty big gale, that one, I think the gale of 51, 49, 50, or 51. It was in November, a big November gale. It blew the trees down all around our house, and the trees were down everywhere. It took a while to get them cleaned up. Remember that?
I think we're probably talking the same storm here, but I remember that I was told when that storm came by that it took them about a week to get to Pimlico Point with chainsaws. Chainsaws weren't a dime a dozen back in those days, and it took a long time to do that. But I remember a few days after that riding by Long Cove on the school bus and looking down at low water, and as far as you could see up in the beaches up in there, there were piles of rope, I would say probably 14, 15 feet high, and traps all around them. It had just cleaned the traps, pushed the whole works up there. There were a half dozen fishermen on each pile trying to get each warp out and save what they could, but I'm like, wow, look at that.
I can remember two fairly good ones. I think maybe Jack knows the year that this roller skating rink got washed out. 66 or 7?
63.
No, it had to be 63. But, well, 'cause I was a kid, but so that seemed like a huge storm, but apparently it wasn't. But that place was quite low, if I remember right. And then I think Hurricane Bob. That was the early 90s, the perfect storm. I do think, I know that's one of the biggest I've ever witnessed, but I had traps moved that have never moved before or since. It's just so rough. The seas were huge.
The next, you want to talk about another storm?
Well, the storm you're speaking about, I happened to be at the Pimlico Beach that day, and they anchored the boats then they used a log for mooring. I mean, they had a chain up the log and went from the log to the boat, and that let the boats ride easier. And I was on the shore, And Fish Point, if you had a pair of one-legged rubber boots on, you couldn't stay on Fish Point without getting wet. It was coming over it, so, and that was when John Partridge's wife went down the same year as the roller skating rink, and Frank McLean's wife went down, and my brother happened to be with me over there, and we saved the boat that was on Frank's. We did it just as kids, you know. He jumped in, and I'd tell him when to go because the full wave was coming, and it was so bad for about 5 minutes, you couldn't see any boat anchored off of Pembroke Beach, and within 5 minutes, it was over. I mean, you could see the boats, but for 5 minutes, it was brutal. It come in over like a little beach it's not the beach where you go swimming so much, it's the one off to the right. It come right in and empty into where the fish house was there. That's what took the roller skating down.
So fires are often and sadly a part of every community. Are there any fires that you remember in New Harbor that especially, remain very vivid in your minds?
A lot of them. One was Skip Workman's house down there for one. It was during the winter time. It was, I would say the wind was no less blowing at least 50 miles an hour, and that probably putting it low. And we run a line from the ice pond, cut a hole through the ice, get the suction going, and was pumping up there, and I usually stayed on the pump and I watched the gauge going up, and I knew what was happening. It was pouring inside of it was so cold. It was the coldest day I think I'd ever been out. The wind was coming down through off the ice there, And Ronnie was with us, and I told Ronnie, I said, we got to get another pump. And I don't know if you people can remember it, but Howard McLean had a oil business up the other side of Bridges, and we put another truck up there. And by putting that other truck in, easing off on that pump, pushing it over to the Workman house, that it took the core in, and you could watch the pressure drop back on the pump, But the story is Russ Brackett was alive at the time, and I know it was blowing so hard that the shingles was coming off of Skip's house, and they had a ladder up. It was blowing right in the harbor, and Russ had shingles and stuff coming down on his barn. And of course, it was setting a lot of grass fires because it was that time of year, grass was dry. And there was, not to say anything to get Skip, but this house was full of bullets and stuff, and you imagine so that's one thing. And then I can bring up another one that where Cormac had another big building down in back of where, I can't think of the name of it, going down Bradley Inn, down to Bradley Inn, and there was called the Sunset House down in behind of it, and it was just as big as Bradley Inn is there now, and that was a fire, and that was back a good many years ago when we didn't have that many pumpers, and we didn't have the trucks for flood water like they do now. And my father knew my grandfather owned a hotel Pembroke down there, and he had a big well in behind where the antique shop is, where Dewey owned, and just right near Minnie Martin's tea shop is there, just above it there. There's a great big well in behind there. We had two pumpers in, and we pretty near had it out when the water let go. So that was the end of it. And there's another big well. The Indians right across from the tea shop near the Bradley and the road that goes down by there was another big well down in there that my father knew. There was Indians. I can remember one Indian that made me a bow and arrow down there. When I was a very small child, I grew up more or less around the hotel. And his name was Teddy. And he made that, but we also pumped out of that to help quiet things down there out of that well. And I'll let you go for your father.
Well, I'm trying.
West by.
I like to go first.
I remember my dad was chief for a long, long time here in town, and I remember a lot of chimney fires back when more people than now burned woods, and the chimneys weren't in the type of shape that they are nowadays. He would get called out in cold weather quite often. But at one time in this town, there was a large broiler industry where people raised chickens for broilers. And there were chicken barns all over. There was one over here in Pemaquid, several up. Steve's father did that. A couple up in Bristol Mills. They were all over. And occasionally those would catch fire. The dust, the sawdust, you know, there were some that were, you know, pretty bad. The birds would die, the people were out, you know, working on them. It was a common occurrence.
I can't top the stick working, so. That was cold.
I thought you might.
That was as cold as it gets,
That was as cold as it gets. Yeah.
I do remember one fire in downtown in Damascus in the dead of winter. I'm sure you were there, Jack. And, and it was very cold. I don't know, but it was snowing on top of that. And departments were called in all over. Like Jack has said before, the equipment wasn't up to what it is now, of course. And they battled a long time on that fire. Damascus Hardware was one of the businesses that was destroyed, and he moved out of that place downtown. My dad said that he encouraged Bob Gardner to do that. I don't know if that's so, but I suspect he did. But it was quite a fire.
I was with your father pumping up there for that fire. And I give you another kind of a funny little story that goes with that. South Bristol rolled in with that pump. It was a child Gamage. I don't know if anybody ever remembers it, but he used to have his pant legs rolled up, and he made all the gallows frames and everything for all the boats that Harvey built over there, the big draggers and everything. And fire to him was nothing because his pants was fire all the time. And it didn't bother him much. So he rolled into South Bristol and it hadn't drained the pump and it was froze up. And I can see now, he was near a pump. We was pumping, I don't know if you people realize it, but it was a place called Joe David's years ago, and it's somewhere near where those laundromat is now up to Damascus down by the river. It was pumping out of that, and his pump was froze up, and the first thing Charles says, give me some rags. Yeah? So they give him a rag, now gasoline. They give him some gasoline, didn't bother him much. He set that afire, and anybody else would burn the truck up with no child. 5 minutes later, he was pumping water with that car. It was incredible. It was incredible to watch. I mean, I was fairly young, and when he said gasoline rags, I know they didn't go together very
Jack, would you tell the story about when you got the first pumper here in New Harbor and testing it out to see how far it could actually pump?
Well, the first pumper we got here was a 1945 Ford, and what he's saying, why they wanted to test it was this building burned down years ago. I can't remember it, but I've heard my father tell stories about it. My grandfather, of course, lived over there, and they put blankets on the barn to save the barn by hauling salt water in the houses up there to pour water down over the barn. But it was a, if I'm telling this right, it was a cow kicked the landing over down there and caught the belfry of fire. And they said, well, that's no problem, we'll just go up and saw it off and push it over, it's fire. So they went out with saws and things was going real good until they run into the steel that held it on, and that was the end of the story. They said everybody came down and stood out in the front yard and then fire. So when we got the first truck, one of the things to do was to go down to the ice pond, which we've just been talking about, cutting the ice and everything, and we run a 2.5-inch line up here, and with a little truck that had a small pump line, Ford truck, pump water over the steeple, and that was why it was done, just to prove that they could do it.
Speaking of the church, we are in a church, and I was just curious if you had any religious traditions associated with your families. I don't want to get too personal.
My mother attended church.
She sure did. She sure did.
And I did until I got old enough to do something.
Our family didn't come to church as a family, but I certainly enjoyed just coming the short distance up here to Sunday school, and later we had a youth choir, and of course we had rehearsal in the middle of the week where my best friends were in the choir, and then later on I taught Sunday school, and I would say that aside from my own family and the school, that the church was a wonderful inspiration for me, and I hold it very dearly in heart. But I also wanted to mention about the fire, the Fillmore fire, which occurred before there was any fire department, and that was over across from where Beth Gilbert lives now. There's a new house there, but that burned flat one night. You could see the glow of the sky from our house across the harbor. With no fire department, there was nothing that could be done. There were 3 lost in that fire, the father, mother, and the son. Yeah, it was arson, the son that set it on fire. The parents were best friends of my grandparents, and the whole community felt it sorely. But it's important in that I believe that was the inspiration for the fire department here. Is that right, Jared? Isn't that what inspired people?
South Bristol came, responded here. We did South Bristol, that fire down.
We called South Bristol to come over for that fire, and of course it was gone time we got there, but it was kind of the pusher to the start of the Bristol Fire Department, and it wasn't actually all of us, but they knew they had to have something. And of course, when they got a bill from South Bristol, that was another kick of that. Bob Search was one of the basic ones behind the fire department, the one that did a lot of pushing. And I want to mention that fire that Brian spoke about, the hardware in Damascora. Ronnie Pendleton's father, we knew him as, what was his first name? I knew him as Bob Pendleton. They credited him for saving, there was a cobbler and his wife on the 2nd floor, and Bob he worked at Colby and Gale's filling station up there, and they credited him for saving those 2 people because he was there at the right time and got them both out of there before it got to them, and most people don't realize that. And that fire, she said, look, the Fillmore said it was a sad, you know, the boy was, he said, I mean, they knew the stories about it, that he went and got propane gas and batteries, and he knew what he was doing. Set it on fire.
We'll save the religious question.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I'd love to hear Jack and Ryan and Stevie's version of the destroying of the dead whale off Pembroke Point with dynamite.
Jared.
I don't know this story that well. You do know the story well about taking care of the dead whale, the punky coat?
What I heard about it was that this rather large whale washed right up high and dry in Lighthouse Cove. And it soon began to deteriorate, and the folks that owned houses down there were beside themselves. So somebody said the only way to get this thing out of here is probably with some dynamite. So that's what happened. They loaded the old girl or boy, whichever he was, with dynamite in. And instead of being in the cove, he was on roofs, on he was everywhere. It just made a colossal mess. And it didn't remove him from the cove, however.
Any other questions you would want to ask this panel? I'd even ask you, is there any question that I should be asking you that I haven't asked you in that kind of way, or you would really want me to ask? Without getting too personal.
Speak up, boys.
Well, another one that I think is fascinating to me growing up in Harbor is the nickname for every fisherman in that house. There was tie-tie and gum, and there was pump, and there was pop, and there was every one of them had famous nicknames. The Judge. Stevie's favorite.
Before Normie passed away, once I was down there talking to him, we went over just what you're saying. I think we had 85 nicknames.
You have another question?
Yes.
Hi, I'd like to ask if your children have stayed in New Harbor.
Have your children stayed in New Harbor? Are they still here?
Yes, my wife and I had 4 children. We lost the boy and the rest of them. In fact, one is here tonight. The rest of them are very close, not right in New Harbor, Bristol Mills, which is not a great way to go. Yeah.
That's the change, and you know, our kids aren't here either. We do have a daughter who lives in Round Pond, whose children we had the pleasure of seeing grow up in the Bristol school system. And you know, until our generation, the families had been around that they didn't go off. But now they spread far and wide, and they travel far and wide.
Job opportunities being what they are on this coast. My daughter lives over in New Hampshire, near Concord, just north of Concord, in a little town called Canterbury. And I think she is in the right place as far as making a good income. But I hope I can pass my house to her when I am no longer in need of it, and I hope she does come here often.
Yeah, economics has changed and the need to move has factored in. I got one kid in New Harbor, one in Walterboro, but one renegade went to Louisiana.
So I thought of a question you might ask us. I thought of a question you might ask us.
Good. Okay, carry on. Yes. What question?
I'm going to have to answer. What are the biggest changes we've seen from now versus when we were growing up? And I'm sure we can think of a lot of them, but I mean, things like just the seines around here. It was so common to see a seine boat, you know, with the seines out around the shore. So many things, but one thing that has impressed me is the freedom that we had to go anywhere. It seemed they didn't even check to see if we had life jackets on, you know. I'd go down to Back Cove and take one of my uncle's boats and row over to New Harbor and stay a while, maybe swim in the harbor. We only got in trouble if we didn't bring it back, but you didn't have to ask permission. But it also, there were paths everywhere, because not everyone had cars, particularly the fishermen. They didn't have to have paths everywhere, and I see that growing up, and it dismays me. But nobody minded if somebody walked across their property. My grandparents lived there on the north side, and if you had gone by way of the road, you would have gone up by the ball field, which is now the Hardy Boat parking lot, and around. Instead, people diagonal right across, and they could touch the corner of the house when they passed and up through the pasture. And they didn't mind that. In fact, they got to meet quite a few people, and we just can't do that sort of thing anymore.
Thank you, Kay. That was my last question, actually, which is, what is the biggest change for you all? What is the largest change from growing up to New Harbor now in 2019? The biggest change, Brian?
Vegetation's changed a lot in this town. By vegetation, I mean the types of trees we have. At one time on the lane here, there were a number of elm trees, big, tall elm trees. Those are pretty much gone. And I was looking the other day at the co-op down there, the Lobster Co-op in New Harbor. There's a panoramic view of the harbor looking back up this way. And it was interesting to see how many spruce trees there were up through here now, where back in the 50s, 60s, and now it's all deciduous, very few spruces. Pembroke Point used to be just solid spruces, and especially down on the end. When I drive down there now, it just looks so much different than it did a few decades ago. That's changed a lot. At the turn of the century, this town was not well forested. There are lots of pictures of looking back up at the church from the harbor when it was basically all pasture with a bunch of boulders. And there was a time, I've been told, when you could go up on the top of the church steeple here and look right down and see the lighthouse. All pasture land. Now we don't need cows, we go to Shop and Save or Riley's, and it's just changed an awful lot.
And I think as a kid you felt completely safe. That was never a worry. You could drive from here to Damascus and plan on waving to every car.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. You might wave to one of the 10 now. And yeah, going to being able to play down in the harbor of Back Cove was just awesome. Some of my friends, we couldn't wait to go to Back Cove, and we'd jump in other people's skiffs and they didn't care. And that's how where we learned how to scour, which is a thing that not many people know how to do anymore. But we kept at it till we learned it. And as long as we tied those skiffs back up, there was no problem. If you didn't tie them back up, you heard about it. Those were awesome days.
Steve, you had one of the first blue lobster boats, and remember how that was such a jinx for so long?
You can blame my stepfather for that. He started that. He had that boat painted blue. Then I bought it. You're right, that was supposed to be bad luck. And my buoys are even blue.
I saw Jim Riley stand on, he wanted to go over to his house, the other side of the harbor, and a kid came over to pick him up, and he had a pondered skiff with a blue bottom in it, and he said, "I'll wait." He wouldn't get in it.
Yeah, that was a bad thing.
Jack, the biggest change between when you were a boy and now here in New Harbor?
Well, we've gone over some of the things like the surf, and
Oh yeah.
we can go to Mr. Riley sitting right there. Rather than it was just a small store when I was young, run by his mother, father, and now he's expanded it, a lot of business. There was the post office we mentioned in his park, in where his parking lot was, the building was there, they moved it out. The surf has been torn down, the building where they mentioned about blasters has been moved and turned around and moved down. The bank wasn't there years ago, that was a parking area where the bank is. For the garage over here, the hammers had to, I mean, you could get any kind of service you wanted when Cliff run the garage, and then Paul took it over. There's still service there now, it's gone.
The Muncie House, right across the road.
Yeah, the Muncie House, you would have, the Muncie House, I know the people know it, probably Virgin and it, but the Muncie House burned as well as the church we've talked about. And that's been rebuilt. And when I was going to go by, Zofa and Connie Muncie run Zofa was running it first, and then Connie and his wife Gladys took it over. And then their cousins, I think, from down east come up and took it over for a while. So it's gone through quite a few changes in our lifetime.
Perfect. We'd just like to say thank you to our entire panel. Thank you for these wonderful stories. Before we start, I'd like to turn it over to Kelly, who would like to have a few words with you all. Do you want this, Kelly?
No, I'll take this one.
I should
That's okay, I recognized it was up. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pastor Kelly. I'm the current pastor of this church, and as you're aware, part of the reason we're doing this is not just to give thanks to these people who gave me a lot of information about this community, but also because we had some issues with our bell tower, and we did have to take it down a few years ago. It is amazing how long it takes to get an estimate on what it will take to do repairs. We've been through now 2 companies, but the one we're currently working with is absolutely fantastic. They've been very responsive. We give thanks to them. They have an estimate that is coming to us momentarily that will have all the detail. We have a high-level estimate right now for doing not only the bell tower, but also some additional work on the church, because we have a lot of issues. As you may have noticed if you look up, we've had some issues with rainwater coming in, the shingles blowing off the roof. So we have issues that need to be repaired there. We have the siding on the church needs to be replaced. We have windows that need to be replaced. So there's a lot going on in the church. But,
Kelly, can I
okay, we're going to just drop that on the floor.
As you're picking that up, I'd like to say that this church actually has an original Currier and Ives painting here. And you might not recognize it, but it's right up in that corner. Because back in 1976, when I came here, Bill Currier, who was the head deacon there, wanted that painted because it was all stained. So he put the ladder up, and Ives went up there. You'll see the initials of Bill Currier and Bob Ives.
As you're aware, if you've been around for a while, the church steeple that was up was this steeple, which had a very open area to all of the elements, and it developed a lot of issues with leaking. And because of that, we were looking at, we don't want to have our children and grandchildren having to do over the work that we're doing now. So we looked at other possibilities. And this is basically what we have come up with for what we're going to be putting up there. This is very close, if you look at the original thing here, it's very close to the original steeple that was there. But what it will have is it will have louvers in these areas so that they will be open. We will be able to ring the bell, if presuming we put the bell back up. But they will catch the rainwater and funnel it out so that it won't end up on the flooring and rotting out the supports for everything. So this is the current plan for the tower. We will be starting a capital campaign fairly soon. As you know, we're still raising money, but we haven't actually sent out a lot of letters and things like that at this point because we needed to have an estimate. So as soon as we have that detailed estimate and we have permission to do the work, then we will go ahead and start that campaign. But we wanted you to see what it is that we're planning on doing and let you know about the other things that as we raise money, the first money is always designated to the tower. That any additional money that we get will be the money we'll be doing to do the siding and to do the windows and to do the roof and all of that. As you know, it's not that cheap keeping buildings healthy in an environment that's open to seawater. So we give thanks for the support that we get from our community here. And we give thanks to all of you for being here this evening, and we hope that you're going to spend a little time chatting with everybody and with our panel of people and having a few snacks over there. And if you want to, we will have this right over there so you can see it. Thank you very much for coming.